Imagine a future where aliens have invaded Earth and carved out their territories from humanity, turning these areas into alien colonies. Inside the colony in Los Angeles, USA, a provisional government is in place, loyal to the alien overlords ruling the area. The people see these government officials as traitors to the human race, so life for the average person is incredibly tough, and resources are scarce. On the other hand, the elite who willingly serve the aliens enjoy resources that are out of reach for the poor. They even have exclusive green zones to live in. To make matters worse, the provisional government enforces strict rules. There's a nightly curfew, and if you're not home by the deadline, you'll be shot down by alien drones. On top of everything, regular citizens aren't allowed to own weapons. If you break that rule, the government will arrest you, no questions asked. Our main character is Will, a former FBI agent living in the colony. After losing his job, he became a mechanic. He has a beautiful wife and 2 wonderful kids. But what most people don't know is that Will has a third, younger son. During the alien invasion years ago, the family tragically got separated from their youngest. This loss has left a deep, unhealed wound in their hearts. That day, Will heads out to work as usual. His wife, Katie, notices something seems different about him, but she doesn't pry. What she doesn't know is that Will has a big plan in motion to escape the colony and search for their missing son. After arriving at the auto shop, he gathers up a bunch of parts and sets off for Santa Monica. On the way, he easily passed the Armed Forces inspection. When he arrived, he got a Santa Monica base pass from a black market dealer. Then, he and Nikki hid inside a refrigerator and rode on a truck to the Santa Monica checkpoint. The truck successfully passed the inspection scanner, but just as the truck was about to continue moving, something unexpected happened. A huge explosion destroyed the place, and Will, who was hiding in the refrigerator, miraculously survived, but the armed forces quickly arrived and arrested him. At this time, Katie still didn't know that her husband had had an accident. She went to the nursing home to secretly buy insulin due to the government's strict control. Insulin has also become a luxury item. She used the best bottle of wine in the house to trade for insulin with a black woman, but she discovered that the other party's insulin was poor quality. She snatched back the liquor bottle, then pulled out a gun, blasting shots as she ran, trying to escape. Will was locked up in jail, begging for a call home to his family, but the prisoners there have no rights whatsoever. It got super late, and he still wasn't back, which had Katie freaking out. Just then, her sister showed up with her son, and it turned out that all that insulin she was fighting for earlier was for her nephew. She promised she'd find a way to get more this week, no matter what. Then, she asked her sister to watch the kids and threw on her coat, rushing out of the house. She went to Will's co-worker Carlos' place, but he wouldn't give up Will's location. Right at that moment, curfew hit, and drones were swarming everywhere. Luckily, Katie was quick thinking and crawled under a car to hide. But then, she watched in horror as Carlos was taken away by armed forces. The next day, totally desperate, she hunted down Eric, begging for help. He suggested she try the hospital, but obviously, she didn't find her husband there. Still, taking advantage of the chaos at the hospital, she managed to swipe a lot of insulin. After hearing about the explosion in Santa Monica, she called Eric again and finally confirmed her husband had been arrested. Meanwhile, Will was being escorted by armed guys to Alan's mansion. There, Will saw firsthand how the super rich lived. Complete luxury. Alan came to him because he wanted to exploit his past as a former special agent. He was hoping Will could investigate the rebels who caused the explosion. If Will agreed, he'd get access to all the resources of the elite. If he refused, his family would be eliminated. Alan gave Will some time to think it over. When Will finally got home, the whole family was relieved. After a moment of intimacy with his wife, he told her about Alan's offer. Katie thought working for the government would make them hated, but Will was considering it for the sake of his family. They ended the conversation on a tense note. Then, the very next day, Alan unexpectedly showed up at Will's house himself. He brought food that ordinary people couldn't even dream of getting and promised to help Katie reopen her bar. Faced with both threats and tempting offers, Will gave his final condition. He wanted Alan to help him find his missing son. Alan agreed without hesitating. Just like that, Will officially became a member of the government's military. What he didn't know was that the next day, Katie secretly met with members of the rebellion. Turns out she'd been quietly working for the rebels all along. And now that her husband was joining the government, she decided to become their inside source. She'd temporarily report on her husband's activities to the rebellion. The next day, Will's job officially started, and he was assigned to the National Security Agency. There, he met his supervisor, Phyllis. As soon as they met, Phyllis gave Will his new assignment: work with a partner to track down Hines, the guy who planted the bomb in the truck. He wasn't a rebel. He was just doing it for the money. Even though he didn't want to, Will had to follow his supervisor's plan. At the same time, Katie went back to her old, abandoned bar. She found her savings and family photos hidden in the ventilation system. While she was packing things up, Eric suddenly showed up at the bar. But since her husband had just started his job, Katie hadn't gathered any information yet. Meanwhile, Will and his partner tracked down Hines' girlfriend. Even though she claimed she hadn't seen him, Will's experience told him she was lying. He drove into a nearby alley, and sure enough, Hines was hiding there. After a tense chase, Will managed to arrest him. After bringing Hines back to jail, Will was shocked to find Carlos also being held there. Turns out he was arrested for smuggling fuel. Carlos was incredibly disappointed to learn Will was working for the government. To help him, Will had to ask Phyllis for help, but even she didn't have the power to intervene. Defeated, Will went back to fix Carlos' car, planning to find his wife and kids, but discovered they weren't there anymore. That's because they were at Will's house. When Katie heard about Carlos' wife and kid situation, she asked Eric for help, but he couldn't do anything either. When Will got home, he was deeply moved to see Carlos' wife and kids were safe. He made fake IDs for them and took them to the slums. Even though the place was chaotic and dangerous, Will asked a trusted friend to look after them. After her husband left, Katie secretly met with a rebel leader, Quayle. When Quayle learned that Will had caught Hines, he realized the situation was extremely critical. The mastermind used to be part of the rebellion, but had split off due to disagreements. If those guys were caught by the government, the entire rebellion could be exposed. So, the mission to sabotage Will's plan was assigned to Katie. Meanwhile, after returning to the agency, Will discovered that Carlos had been sent to the alien labor camp. He went to Phyllis for help, but unfortunately, she was still powerless. Right before the truck carrying Carlos was taken away, Will ran over and managed to tell him about his wife and kids. People sent to the labor camp were stripped naked and subjected to intense, blinding light. Eventually, they had to put on protective suits and enter the brightly lit area. After getting home, Will was overwhelmed with guilt, so he drank to drown his sorrows in the yard. Then, he got a call from his partner telling him Hines had revealed the hideout of his accomplices. As soon as he left the house, Katie tipped off Eric. Will arrive at the location to find all of Hines' accomplices had been wiped out. Right then, he realized there was a mole in the government. The next day, in an abandoned junkyard, a homeless guy used a radio to recount the entire Santa Monica event to the public. He called the guys who transported the bomb heroes and urged everyone to bravely stand up against the government. As soon as the military got the report and arrived on the scene, the guy had vanished without a trace. At the same time, the resistance started a new operation, and Katie joined them. They brought weapons, blocked a truck belonging to the armed forces, stole the soldiers' walkie-talkies, and intentionally leaked information. When the people rushed in to loot the goods, their teammate Justin was shot by a drone. To avoid affecting the whole group, Eric shot and killed him, and the others hid in the shadows. Then, they calculated the arrival, time of reinforcements, and drones. Turns out it was just a test. But seeing civilians and teammates being killed, Katie felt unbearable pain. She went home and frantically scrubbed the blood off her body. Will noticed his wife's strange behavior and wanted to know what happened, but Katie didn't say a word. At the same time, their eldest son was kept after school by his teacher. Turns out, both he and the teacher were supporters of the resistance movement, and the boy had been giving the teacher secret recordings. Recently, the teacher had been observing the sky and discovered a mysterious object in low Earth orbit. It was something the aliens were building. In another development, Will and his partner arrived at the scene of the crime. With his extensive experience, he realized Justin was a member of the resistance and asserted that this was a planned heist. He reported this news to Phyllis, but unexpectedly, it caused trouble for Justin's parents. When he rushed to Justin's house, he found that the armed forces were indiscriminately arresting his parents. Even though Will felt bad about it, he couldn't change the outcome. Unbeknownst to him, Eric was witnessing everything in the crowd and reporting the situation to Quayle. Quayle believed Justin wouldn't leave any clues about the rebellion in his house. He ordered Eric to ask Katie for more information about the government's next plan. When Will got home, he told his wife everything that happened that day. Katie tried to suppress her pain and pretended nothing was wrong, then secretly went out to meet the rebels. Because of Eric's cold-blooded ruthlessness, Katie wasn't happy with him, but she still had to carry out the organization's mission. Eric demanded she find a way to get more information about the government from Will. Around the same time, the eldest son, Bram, led by his girlfriend, went to an abandoned hydroelectric power plant and secretly entered an underground tunnel where they met his girlfriend's cousin. The girlfriend told Bram that above these stairs was a new world. They didn't climb up, but with Bram's help, they brought Pedro home safely. Back at his unit, Phyllis found some information about Justin and asked her to follow this lead to find the rebellion. So, the two of them went to an abandoned stadium at night and were unexpectedly attacked by a mysterious figure. Although they didn't catch the attacker, they discovered weapons hidden at the location. This was one of the rebels' bases, and Eric and Quayle soon received the news as well. They didn't expect the government to investigate this place so quickly. Because of that, Eric met with Katie, demanding she choose between the organization and her husband. This caused Katie immense inner conflict. Soon, it was the opening day of Katie's bar. Alan himself was there to reassure the people in the quarantine zone, but Alan's presence only made Katie more worried. She hoped her husband could use his current position to take the whole family out of this place and start a new life. Will, however, was determined to stay and use the government to find their youngest son. Faced with this decision, Katie could only feel helpless. At the same time, Eric came to bar, and Katie told him that the government had a huge database and only Will's superiors knew how to operate it. If they wanted to control this intelligence, the organization couldn't harm her husband. The two quickly reached an agreement. The next day, Phyllis met with Will and shared some top-secret information from the unit. She told him that the leader of the rebellion was a man named Nemo. Even though it was being pressured into taking on this mission, Phyllis had a lot of faith in his abilities. She believed that the rebellion's actions wouldn't change anything, only bring humanity closer to extinction. So, she asked him to try even harder to find Nemo. At the same time, the rebels' plan was put into motion to help Katie easily approach Phyllis and learn what she looked like. After everyone left the house, the rebels intentionally set fire to Katie's house. After putting out the fire, Katie called the police and informed her husband. When Will got home, the place was completely controlled by his unit. They saw it as a provocation by the rebellion against the government. Soon, Agent Jennifer arrived on the scene and discovered an ancient coin that could have been hidden inside the bomb. It was likely some kind of message. For safety reasons, they asked to bring Katie in for questioning, but Will was stopped right outside because Phyllis only wanted to see Katie alone. At the same time, Katie's sister got a new job opportunity and was hired to work in the Green Zone, where all the elite lived. Thanks to her excellent skills, she quickly caught the eye of Senator Charlotte and went from a temporary employee to a permanent one. Inside the security area, Phyllis conducted a series of questions with Katie, even including questions about her private life. These questions made Katie incredibly uncomfortable. After leaving, she told her husband that she felt worried and then left the security area alone. Will went to Phyllis, questioning her about what she had asked his wife, but she unexpectedly pulled out a small box filled with recordings that promoted the rebellion. What's worse, they were found in Bram's room. If these were exposed, the consequences for Bram would be dire. Luckily, Phyllis was willing to help Will cover it up. So, after getting home, Will grilled his son about where he got the recordings and why he knew about their contents. Overcome with fear, Bram confessed everything. That night, Katie went to the rebels' new base. Quayle presented a stack of photos and asked her to identify Phyllis. But before doing so, Katie demanded he guarantee her husband's safety. The next day, the rebellion's propagandists went back on the air. Will and his team tracked the broadcast signal and quickly found the guy's hideout. Knowing he had nowhere to run, the propagandists decided to stay and voluntarily surrender. Because the rebels almost burned down Will's house, he took out all his anger on the guy. They initially thought the propagandist was the leader, Nemo, but the investigation revealed that wasn't the case. Soon, based on the propagandist's testimony, they discovered that the place he usually got his information from was right next to the Green Zone. Will speculated that Nemo's hideout was likely inside the Green Zone. After finishing work, Bram sought out his dad to explain why he listened to the rebellion's recordings. He said that Nemo had told him that the alien rule would eventually end, so he hoped his dad wouldn't focus all his attention on hunting down Nemo. Just then, Phyllis unexpectedly showed up at the bar and sought out Katie. She put photos in front of Katie, showing her first time participating in an operation with the rebels, and demanded she work for her. Katie, left with no other choice, had to submit. Phyllis, feeling she had achieved her goal, went home satisfied. She was about to tell the story to her husband, who was impotent due to a stroke, when Eric, who had broken into the house beforehand, killed both her and her husband. Influenced by the rebel broadcasts, protests were increasing, and countless young people were rushing to the streets, posting rebel posters everywhere. Of course, the National Security Agency quickly noticed them and deployed armed forces to arrest many protesters. Phyllis's death quickly attracted the attention of the unit. Her partner, Bo, went to Will's house and told him the news. Katie, hiding behind the wall, was terrified when she heard this news. Will rushed to Phyllis's house. The walls of the living room were covered in writing mentioning the name Nemo. Alan especially took this seriously because there were very few people with Phyllis's rank in the entire colony. The fact that she was murdered right under the government's nose meant who knows how many more people would panic and be afraid. And just at that moment, Jennifer received a call reporting that the unit had captured someone named Nemo. But when they got back to the National Security Agency, they discovered it was just a young kid. Will threatened that if he didn't tell the truth, he would be sent to the exploitative labor camps. Soon, based on the kid's testimony, they found a mansion in the Green Zone. After conducting a raid, they discovered the place was empty. Finally, Will himself found the secret passage, and inside, 2 people were hiding. The place contained a lot of intelligence documents about the rebellion. The radio stations quickly reported on the incident and declared it a major victory for the government. This news panicked many members of the rebellion. In reality, Alan's actions were only intended to reassure the people and use the victory to control the situation. Afterward, Will went into the underground interrogation room of the National Security Agency. From the interrogation of a rebel member, he learned that Nemo had never actually existed. The leader, Nemo, was just a fictional character used to leverage his image to influence real rebels. Will thought he had completed his mission, so he wanted Alan to fulfill his promise. Unexpectedly, Alan suddenly turned on him and demanded he wipe out the entire rebellion, and because of Phyllis's death, he even ordered him to take over her position. No one knew that the rebellion was secretly planning an even bigger operation. Due to Alan's request, Will decided to investigate Phyllis's death, and he sought out Jennifer because he suspected she was involved, but she vehemently denied it. Eventually, he even began to suspect Katie. After getting home and questioning the tutor, he learned that she hadn't shown any unusual behavior. He went to the bar and secretly searched for clues, but still didn't find anything. At the same time, Bram and his girlfriend escaped the colony through a secret underground tunnel. They went to a wasteland controlled by aliens and stole a large amount of rare supplies, then returned to the colony. He sought out his teacher, who said he could help him get a telescope lens so he could observe what the aliens were doing in space. In another development, Alan met with his superior, Helena. He reported that Nemo was only a spiritual symbol and hoped to use Nemo's name to turn the situation around. Helena didn't want to waste time with him, so after agreeing to the plan, she left immediately. Alan returned to the National Security Agency and ordered the propagandist to be brought to him. He wanted the guy to impersonate Nemo and take all the responsibility, and he would spare his life. Terrified, the propagandist had no choice but to accept. That night, Will was still worried. So he secretly returned to the bar in the dark, but still couldn't find any clues. After returning to the National Security Agency, he apologized to Jennifer for suspecting her. From her, he learned that Jennifer's fiancé had died in the previous explosion, causing her to hate the rebellion to her core. Soon after, Nemo's trial officially began. In the media's live broadcast, Alan played the role of judge, announcing Nemo's crimes before the entire population. And as soon as the trial ended, he turned ruthless, disregarding his earlier promise. He publicly executed the propagandist, and then led Will to meet a mysterious figure. At the same time, rebel members disguised as armed forces were ready to carry out a new plan. Will, in the car, didn't understand Alan's actions, but politics are inherently cruel. To stabilize power and the people's morale, he had to do it. When the car reached an intersection, the people disguised as armed forces suddenly attacked. It turned out their goal was to kidnap Alan, and the previous actions were only stepping stones for this plan. Because Will was also in the car, Eric couldn't shoot at him and could only watch them drive away. Just then, reinforcements and drones arrived, and the rebels had no choice but to retreat. At the bar, Katie worriedly called her husband, but no one answered. And just then, there was a knock at the door. Unexpectedly, Will brought Allen to hide at the bar, believing that this was a coup, not an action by the rebels. Terrified, Allen forbade Will from contacting the armed forces. Finally, Will decided to call the person he truly trusted. He told Allen to hide in the main hall while he and his wife went into the office. Katie didn't understand why her husband was risking his life for Allen, while the phone in the office had long been cut off. After going outside, Will decided to go out and call for help, and he left Katie and Allen there. Because the plan failed, the rebellion lost teammates. Just when they were discussing the next step, Katie called to report that Allen was hiding in the bar. Just as they waited for the rebellion to arrive, Will unexpectedly returned to the bar. He had contacted reinforcements, but they wouldn't arrive for at least 20 minutes. Katie knew the rebellion was coming, and for her husband's safety, she thought they couldn't keep hiding there. Will didn't see anything to worry about, and he even asked his wife to bandage his wounds. Just as they stepped out of the room, Allen unexpectedly brought good news. He had just received news from a contact in Santa Monica that Will's youngest son, Charlie, was still alive. He intended to take Will to meet Helena, because only she had a way to solve Charlie's problem. Seeing Allen so certain, Katie changed her mind. Just then, there was a knock at the bar door, and Eric was standing in front of it. Realizing the situation was not good, Will ran away. Then, Eric used the excuse of wanting to inspect the basement and led Katie downstairs. Quayle had ordered Allen to be captured at all costs. They could avoid harming Will, but they had to bring Allen out. Then, Eric left the bar first. This didn't make Will suspicious, but the jacket that Allen had left behind. In the hall, May will understand they would be back. So, he used chairs to barricade the bar doors and grab a rifle, preparing for the upcoming emergency. Soon, Eric and his accomplices returned to the bar, and a battle was about to erupt. Luckily, Will and Katie were both safe in the end. At this time, reinforcements and drones arrived at the bar, and Allen, who was hiding in the liquor cabinet, also escaped unharmed. After he left, Will looked at his wife and understood everything. He guessed that Katie was a member of the rebellion. He went home and told his wife the truth about Nemo's execution, then told her to stay home and not go out on her own. On the rebellion side, because of Katie's actions today, Quayle suspected she was a double agent, gathering information from the rebellion, while also revealing the situation to Will. Katie also had nightmares because she hadn't helped the rebellion capture Allen. She dreamed of shooting and killing Eric, so she left home early in the morning and went to the bar. As soon as she got close to the bar, she discovered the place had been completely sealed off by the government. Worried, she went to the rebel base and found the place was empty. Then she went to Eric's house, but found the door tightly closed. It seemed everyone had escaped. At the same time, the National Security Agency, through the data network, identified Eric's true identity within the government. Because he wanted to capture him, Allen decided to support Will unconditionally and give them full authority to act. Soon after, the operation to capture Eric began. Armed forces surrounded his house, but they didn't expect the opponent to have set a trap. As soon as the house door was opened, the Special Forces team was blown away by a hidden bomb, killing 4 agents on the spot. This made Will even more suspicious of Eric's true identity. He and Bo investigated him everywhere. From the accounts of 2 of Eric's former teammates, they learned that Eric had a winged skull tattoo, which was a symbol of the Navy SEALs. But while they were still searching for Eric, he was planning something new. Eric snuck into a restricted area of the government, took out the guards, and stole a body from the back of a truck. Jennifer, inside the National Security Agency, found information related to Eric and discovered he had never joined the Navy SEALs. Will realized these documents were worthless, so he asked Jennifer to use facial recognition to search for information about him. In another development, Eric took the body he had just stolen and faked the scene to make it look like he had died in an accident. The scene was quickly discovered by the National Security Agency, and they believed it was Eric because eliminating a failed member was a familiar tactic of the rebellion. Will, with his clear mind, understood that this was just a diversion and didn't agree to end the case so easily. Meanwhile, Katie had snuck into the bar, based on a secret letter that the rebellion had sent. She knew she had to go to the designated location to meet a rebel member. When she arrived at the park, Eric drove up to pick her up and took her to an empty square. Eric wanted to know if Katie had betrayed the organization. Even though Quayle always thought Katie was a traitor, Eric still wanted to trust her. Katie was extremely disappointed by Eric's suspicion. Everything she had done was for the organization, but she didn't expect to be suspected in the end. She was disappointed, and after she left, Eric secretly met with J-Trox. It turned out that Quayle had ordered her to take care of Katie that day, but after their conversation, Eric felt that maybe it was just a misunderstanding. So, in the end, the two decided to trust Katie. The next day, Will went to the Green Zone to meet Alan. Although Jennifer had used facial recognition to search for information about Eric, she didn't have enough authority, and since Eric had used too many fake identities, they needed Alan to grant higher clearance. Not only that, but Alan also gave Will a file, and inside was a picture of Charlie. He confirmed that Charlie was still alive, which made Will and his wife extremely happy, and also gave him more motivation. The next day, he went to the National Security Agency. Because the amount of data was too large, Jennifer hadn't been able to find any useful information yet. Just then, Bo came to Will and handed him a file. Next, Will rushed home. It turned out that they had found fingerprints related to Eric in the bar, so they believed that his wife had met with Eric. Of course, Katie didn't know anything, but when she heard Will say that Eric used to be a government assassin and then joined an arms dealer, she was very surprised. In the end, she still decided to admit that she had met with Eric and revealed his old address. Will and his team quickly found Eric's real name and prepared to arrest him. At the same time, J-Trox came to Katie's bar and said that Eric didn't trust anyone except Katie, which made her compassion surge. In the end, she contacted Eric and revealed the news that Will was coming to arrest him. As a result, Will's operation failed again, and all of this was seen by Quayle, who was living next door. The people who were arrested and imprisoned in the exploitative labor camps had to do complex tasks, and if they got sick, they would be cruelly executed. Carlos had gradually gotten used to life there. Little did anyone know that when he looked out the window of his room, what he was seeing was the distant earth. During the arrest of Eric, Will happened to find the book that his wife owned at the scene, which made him even more certain of her suspicious nature. But he didn't expose her. Instead, he shared the news that Charlie was still alive with her. At the same time, Helena came to Alan's office. Because it was the first anniversary of the establishment of the colony, the president of the Pacific Rim region would be coming to Los Angeles. In reality, this party was more like an evaluation, so she asked Alan to ensure the security of the region and not let the situation become more serious. In another development, for the safety of the children, Katie decided to withdraw. Currently, the rebellion in Los Angeles had been almost completely wiped out, so there was no longer a chance of winning. J-Trox also decided to help her, so that Quayle wouldn't implicate her and her family. A mysterious call suddenly came into Will's office inside the security zone. The caller was Quayle, the leader of the rebellion. He revealed to Will that Katie had betrayed him and even arranged a private meeting. So, following the instructions in the call, Will took a bus to meet Quayle. He wanted to cooperate with Will in capturing Eric, but the condition was that Will had to guarantee his safety and allow him to leave the quarantine zone. At this time, Eric still didn't know he was about to be betrayed. He received information from a member that the president was coming to the colony soon. After returning to the National Security Agency, Will talked to Bo about the call. He worried that Quayle's actions could be detrimental to him, but for his wife's safety, he still decided to report the news to Alan. When he learned that the other party's request was to leave the quarantine zone, Alan recognized the seriousness of the problem, but he had to meet and negotiate. That night, Eric sought out Quayle and announced that the president was coming, and he also handed Quayle a file. After returning home, Will still didn't expose his wife's secret. He just vented a little anger and revealed to Katie that Quayle had contacted him to betray Eric. After hearing this, Katie realized the situation was extremely dangerous, so she went to the bar and reported the news to Eric. But he didn't believe Quayle would betray him. Even so, he sought out Quayle to confirm the truth, and of course, Quayle wasn't stupid enough to tell the truth. With just a few words, he easily dispelled the suspicion. Eric couldn't find any evidence, so he had to trust him. The next day, Will led Alan to the place where he had arranged to meet Quayle and reiterated the conditions. Quayle promised that when the time was right, he would lure Eric and the rebel members from other colonies out, so they could catch them all in one go. In return, he had to be allowed to leave the colony. The two sides reached an agreement, so the meeting day soon arrived. Eric and his accomplices were all within Will's surveillance range, but what they didn't know was that Eric had also taken precautions. He asked Katie to secretly monitor the situation from nearby. When she saw the armed forces appear, she notified Eric. Realizing the plan had been exposed, the armed forces rushed out, but even then, they couldn't capture Eric. This made Alan extremely angry, and he decided to interrogate Quayle personally. Will feared that the truth about his wife would be revealed, so he decided to act first. He went to the temporary shelter, killed Quayle, and blamed it on rebellion. This incident again enraged Allen, and he took all his anger out on Will. That evening, the captured rebel members were hung in the middle of the city as a show of force. Katie witnessed this scene and felt extreme pain, but Eric also appeared there and told her not to take any action for the time being. He wanted to wait for the right opportunity to counterattack. The government's cruel actions angered the public, and people flocked to the streets to commemorate the deceased. The armed forces arrived at the scene to suppress the people, but a conflict broke out, not only here, but riots also erupted in other neighborhoods, and countless police officers were eliminated. Allen was extremely worried about this situation. Will received intelligence that the rebellion had established a base outside the colony. The source was extremely reliable. They suspected that someone found an unsealed tunnel beneath the alien wall. In reality, Will had fabricated all of this information with the sole purpose of gaining higher authority. But ironically, this lie turned out to be the truth. At that time, the rebellion was planning a major attack, so Eric took Katie to their new base. Because the president was coming to inspect Los Angeles and there was information that he would be traveling by subway, they decided to launch the attack at the MacArthur station and then take hostages. In another development, Will, using the authority that Allen provided, easily crosses Los Angeles and enters the wasteland. His plan this time was to observe this deserted area. After inspecting the surrounding areas, the two staged a scene with the armed forces. They pretended to be rebels who had just been hiding there and even intentionally left behind false clues. With the signs pointing to the day of the inspection, the rebellion might take action in several locations. What he didn't expect was that Allen had found the secret tunnel leading to the wasteland. After Allen learned the news, he prepared to seal the passage. Will stopped him and argued that they could use this place to ambush the rebellion. That night, Katie was in the bar basement, receiving special training from Eric. Because this was her first time participating in a mission, Katie felt very anxious. Eric told her to gather all her courage to carry out the mission, just like how she protected her husband. When she stepped out of the basement, Katie unexpectedly discovered that her husband was also there. It turned out that ever since he learned about the secret tunnel, Will had hatched a plan to take his wife and children through the tunnel to escape the colony. He didn't tell Katie, but decided that the next day, he would leave Bo to inspect the route of the underground tunnel. That night, Katie prepared everything. After saying goodbye to her son and daughter, she prepared to set off. She saw her daughter reading a book about aliens, and was full of brainwashing content, urging people to worship them. Just then, Will drove home. He wanted to take the whole family out of the colony, and this news surprised Katie. Seeing that she didn't want to go, he told her directly that he knew she was an informant. The viewpoints of the two were opposite. Katie claimed that everything she did was for the family, and she hated this government. She hoped that her husband would join her, but he felt that his wife was too crazy. Their conversation ended on a tense note. Little did they know that the entire conversation had been overheard by Bram. Tonight, he also had his plan, which was to go through the secret tunnel with his teacher to the wasteland, and then they would search for a telescope in the ruins and study what the aliens had built on the moon. At the same time, they wanted to understand the true purpose of the invasion of Earth. Meanwhile, Will went to hydroelectric power plant and arranged for Bo to leave first. After saying goodbye, the two finally went their separate ways. At the same time, Katie's operation officially began. She and Eric charged straight into the subway station. After taking down each of the guards, they successfully reached the train tracks. They installed bombs there as quickly as possible, but because it was their first time, they didn't calculate the amount of explosives accurately. The explosion destroyed the entire train. The explosion killed all of the aliens' guards, and even the president who was inspecting the train. Luckily, this time, they had discovered the true appearance of the aliens hiding behind the human masks. They also captured a live alien and secretly took it away. The provisional government mobilized all the important figures because of this incident. Even Helena personally came to the security headquarters to command the operation and prepared to carry out a massacre in the colony. Elsewhere, the rebellion had taken the alien to the secret basement. After confirming that it didn't have any tracking devices on it, they decided to take it back to the base. After Will returned, he wanted to ensure the safety of his children, so he asked his sister to take them to A, safe place, because his sister had a romantic relationship with Allen. She decided to take the children to the green zone. At this time, Katie had gone missing, which made Will extremely worried. Under his intense questioning, Bram finally took out a note that his mother had left behind before setting off. Will call the phone number on the note, but because they hadn't returned to the base yet, no one answered. At this time, Katie and everyone else were in an extremely dangerous situation because all of Los Angeles had been locked down. The entrance to the green zone had become chaotic, and soon the streets were deserted. Luckily, they quickly blocked a police car, took down the special forces team inside, and successfully commandeered the vehicle. In another development, Alan was about to be dismissed from his position because of this mistake before the city was destroyed. He found his daughter and wanted her to take the past and start a new life. Will's sister had taken the children into the green zone in the last seconds before the lockdown went into effect, but Bram escaped midway and disappeared. Later, Will went to the subway station and, based on the surveillance footage at the scene, knew that there were two perpetrators this time. Will recognized his wife, but luckily, they were wearing hoods, so their faces weren't exposed. Meanwhile, the situation on Katie's side was extremely dire. Shelling was deafening, and innocent people were being brutally murdered. This was all revenge from the aliens. They wanted humanity to understand the serious consequences of betraying them. After overcoming countless dangers, Katie finally returned to base and prepared to study the alien. Just then, Will called, but Katie still didn't want to reveal the situation and only told her husband to be careful. After returning to the security agency, Will asked Jennifer to track the location to call, and unexpectedly, it was right near the security agency. Under Jennifer's questioning, Will was forced to take out the rebels' code book and tell her about his wife. With Jennifer's help, they deciphered the information in the book and found a clue about the engineers. At the same time, Katie and her teammates' actions were also not very smooth. Because the alien technology was too advanced, they couldn't penetrate their armor. Everything was at a standstill, but during this time, wanting to save his wife, Will decided to infiltrate the secret base alone. While the rebellion was busy deciphering the information, Will unexpectedly appeared and warned them that the government was about to track them down. To ensure the safety of this place, they had to hand over the alien. Otherwise, they would all die. Seeing that Eric and the others still refused to leave, Katie disabled the signal blocking system and forced them to leave. The moment the signal was restored, a series of drones swarmed in the sky. Will couldn't wait any longer and rushed in. Finally, he saw the true appearance of the alien. Soon after, the armed forces arrived and escorted them away. Because Will had found them in time, the city was restored to peace. Wanting to thank him, Alan gave him a pass to Santa Monica so he could go find his son. As the helicopter took off, everything returned to silence. After Alan resigned, Alan became the new governor of Los Angeles. Bram, who had escaped from the Green Zone midway, also entered the underground tunnel with his teacher. Unexpectedly, the armed forces were already lying in ambush there, and the two were caught red-handed. As for Will, he took the pass and legitimately left the Los Angeles colony. The four-person family that once was now only had Katie alone. Instead of calling this movie a science fiction film, perhaps it's more like a detective film. From beginning to end, the true appearance of the aliens was never revealed, especially that of the female lead, Katie. It's clear she joined a rebellion for her family, but in the end, she disregarded their safety and decided to participate in that mission, and she didn't even consider the safety of the children. Only the male lead is the one who always remembers that they did everything to find their youngest son, Charlie. Furthermore, the aliens can rule on their own, but throughout the process, they delegate control to humans. Even their transportation relies on outdated subways, which is hard to wrap your head around.